Adelaide, Lima Tango Bravo, Malplane, landing Bradshaw, Zara Tackling Shuttle.
Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas, everybody. Merry Christmas. Hello there, little boys and girls. Do you want some lollies?
How are you, Santa Claus?
Look at all the lollies we've got.
Anyone we know?
Yes.
What have you wished for Christmas?
A game of Monopoly.
A game of Monopoly. Well, if you've been good, you'll get that, won't you?
Hope so.
Christmas for the McBean family is much the same as it is for anyone else throughout the world.
Swimsuit. Funny looking swimsuit.
Oh, really good.
What is it?
Bottle stopper, set of 4.
My name is Kay McBean.
Lucky charm or something.
My daughter Fiona's 11 and Sam's 12, and at Christmas time they get a few extra treats that they don't get during the year. This is my husband Ian, and Bradshaw Station is our home. Over the next 12 months, you'll see that life on an Outback cattle station is very much governed by the seasons, the wet and the dry. Bradshaw is one of the largest privately owned cattle stations in Australia, around 10,000 square kilometres. We live right at the top end of northern Australia. We don't necessarily feel isolated, but we are cut off from the outside world by the Victoria River. The nearest place to go shopping is Katherine, 380 kilometres to the east.
I suppose to most people it'd be terribly lonely, fantastically lonely. I mean, you can't get radio reception most of the time. You've got to have satellite dishes and that to get TV. We've got good phone communication now that we didn't have a few years ago. You can't go down to the local pub to have a few beers or go to the cinema or anything like that. Go down to the shopping mart, the supermarket. But I've been up here 40 years and it's only virtually the only way of life I know. And I'm perfectly happy here. And luckily my family are too. Fire's actually part of life out here. It's often started by lightning, and the Aboriginals used to use it in days gone by to burn the grass, to get their game out. There's always really good regeneration after fire. Sam and I light these fires to burn off the old grass. The new growth which follows doesn't have to fight its way up through the old grass, and the cattle can really get into the new fresh green shoots. This is Sam's last year before he goes away to boarding school. He's lived all his life out here in the bush, and it's going to be tough on all of us when it comes time for him to leave. We're going to miss him very much, because besides being a great little mate, he's a very capable boy. Just hope that one day he decides to come back to the bush after he finished school.
I'm not quite sure what the future holds for us. I think we've made it, but you can't rest on your laurels. You've got to keep working at it the whole time, because the moment you stop, it'll probably crumble beneath you. But yeah, it's just taken a long time. We've had it 10 years now. We've only lived here 8 years, but it's been a long haul to get there.
Cattle mustering's changed a lot over the years. The biggest transformation has come about by the use of helicopters. One chopper can do the work of 10 men. What used to take us 3 or 4 days to do, we now can do in the morning. The actual system of mustering is much the same as it's always been. In the old days, men on horseback would spread out behind the wild bush cattle and push them down in to join the quieter cattle in the herd. This would take a long time, maybe a couple of days, because the men had to go out and find the cattle, maybe track them up and then run them down to the quieter cattle. Nowadays, a helicopter will go out, quickly find the fresh cattle and run them back into the herd in no time at all. Although this is the first muster for the year, it'll probably be our biggest muster, ending up with about 2,500 head. When I was a young fella, I never gave any thought to owning a station of my own, big or little. I just liked working with stock, riding a horse, mustering, droving cattle. That was all I lived for in those days. I've been very fortunate in having sons who've also enjoyed the lifestyle as much as I have.
I like being out in the bush. I love riding a horse. I love just all the action that goes on, all the fun of it. I don't really notice that I work as hard as the men, but I just work my hardest and try my hardest at everything, and I get somewhere anyway.
A lot of the lads that come up here now are well educated and have a lot more potential to get on in the future than a lot of the chaps did in the past. But by the same token, a lot of those fellows in the past were perfectly happy to stay on as stockmen, maybe for their whole working life. Here you are, Johnny, here. Here you're panicking here.
You got a sharp one of these, you can basically trim up all that frog and everything too.
I've 5 children by my first marriage. Doug's the only one of the older kids who works with me now. He's flying the chopper here and runs the stock camp.
and is by far the best horseman and ringer on the place.
Usually the younger stockmen we get don't know how to shoe that well, so play up the role there again of showing them how to shoe and getting a couple of horses sort of ready for a couple of months' work.
You're totally reliant on the men you've got, but the men you've got are virtually the same as taking a young colt from a horse breaker. I mean, you make that horse into the best possible servant you can.
That's an animal, you know. Right. You want to use your hands. You don't just drag his head round. You're not pulling a barramundi. No wonder they bloody play up on you.
And this is Catherine saying good morning to the brilliant bountiful Baines bunch.
Morning, my name is Colorado.
Okay, good to hear you all this morning. Let's see who we've got. Good morning, Mitch.
Good morning, Miss Colorado.
Oh, loud and clear this morning. Mum was saying that the choppers were flying over before. Have they gone?
Yes, they are.
Oh, good. Okay, so you should be clear. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning, Miss Cartwright.
Good to hear you. Good morning, Fiona.
Good morning, Miss Cartwright.
Good to hear you all. Loud and clear this morning. Radio seems to be a bit better. Okay, what we're going to do today then is we're going to start some work on messages and communication.
Sam and Fiona are on Catherine's School of the Air, which serves children in the top half of the Northern Territory. The school caters for an average of 200 students from preschool to 7.
Marcus, what message have you been given?
Start school,
All right, how did you get that message to start school?
Mum told me,
All right, so Mum used her voice and told you that it was time to start school. Good. Fiona, what message have you received this morning?
An alarm clock goes off and tells you to wake up in the morning, over.
Well done, the alarm clock, okay. What sort of message does that give you? What sort of noise does it make?
A terrible one, over.
Does everyone agree that it's a terrible noise when the alarm tells you to get up
I've got
in the
my brother
morning?
out here and my closest friend's about 50 kilometres away. I see her about 4 times a year, but next year she's going to boarding school. So my closest friend then will be about 600 kilometres away. It gets hot in the wet season and cold in the dry, but they're both sort of cool some of the time because the dry is always fairly cold. In the wet season it gets cold when it rains, so it's nice. I like both of them. I don't get lonely out here because there's too much to do. I get to ride my horse, I go for a swim. I've got school for a long time during the day. On the weekend I can do my stamp collection. I've got a lot of cross stitch I do. Going to the city's alright, but I wouldn't like to live there for too long. Too much traffic and not enough space. And I like gardening and playing gardens and things, and riding my horse.
Both of the kids love to go out mustering with Ian, but Sam in particular will get out of school whenever he can to be with the cattle.
Rita! There!
It's good you get out of school a couple of days, but you've always got to go back and catch up Saturday or Sunday, or both sometimes.
Yeah.
Being with the boys, just learning about the cattle and the horses, and got my dog to keep me company out there, and it's good.
Heavy yard.
After each muster, the cattle are drafted in order to take off the weaners from their mothers, separate out the meat workers and the calves that have to be branded, and also for disease eradication purposes. part of the staple diet of a big percentage of the world's population. And to provide consumers with the best possible product, coupled with what to the layman would look like fairly drastic operations, are necessary. Castration is necessary because you're only going to get your best beef from young steers, which are young castrated bulls. A big mob of steers is also pretty easy to handle, whereas a mob of young bulls would cause many problems, including indiscriminate breeding.
Cattle industry is a business like any other. You've got to keep up with modern developments. I need to be in the office 7 days a week. During the dry season, the phone goes non-stop. Yes, good afternoon. Would you have any hay available? When machinery breaks down, particularly in the camp, I need to order in parts from town. I order in all the supplies, the necessities like food and fuel that keep the station turning over. Everything that's brought onto the station has to be barged across the river, and everything that leaves the station has to be barged out as well. And that includes all the cattle we sell.
When my friends heard that I was going to buy Bradshaw, I think they thought I was a bit off my brain, been touched by the sun or something, because they all knew that I had very limited capital, and it was going to be a real headache trying to get this place functioning. On Bradshaw, you have to face this isolation. The river will always be here, it always has been there. And every owner that's ever been here, right from old Joe Bradshaw's time, had to face up to the fact. The only way to handle this isolation is through operating efficiently as you possibly can. Good year, our best beef goes as live export to Asia, Indonesia and Malaysia. This year, because of the poor wet season, all our stock are going to the meatworks will end up as hamburgers in the United States. We have to operate from a number of different stock camp sites because of distances. When we finish mustering and drafting the cattle in one area, we'll pack up camp, shift to a new campsite and start the whole operation over again. These blokes are doing really well now. We've been going for about 4 months. They've all learned a lot and we've got a really top little stock camp.
Well, I was 16 when I come here last year, and I didn't really have much of a clue about what anything looked like, the country, how much water there was here. There's a lot more water, big rivers everywhere.
No, real average day, it could be anything. Early morning, sometimes, mainly around 6 o'clock breakfast, and then finish whatever time, darkness normally, as the sun goes down.
It's very difficult to sort of notice changes in yourself. I know that I spoke to an old friend in the UK just before, a couple of weeks ago, and he seemed to think I turned into Crocodile Dundee or something. But it's, I think other people probably notice changes, but it's very difficult to notice changes in yourself. the last frontier, I suppose. Territory's been called that. And to a certain extent, I guess it is. There's very few places, I think, in the Western world, at any rate, that have probably got this sort of lifestyle. I'd rather doubt that there's anywhere in the States that's still got the last frontier sort of mentality, if you like.
Wait there, come on. Steady up there. Hey there, come on. Get around, get around, get around, get around. Go on. Go on, you dozy bastards. Get around, go on.
I do this every afternoon. I usually do it in the afternoon so the boys can have hot bread for tea at night. Just usually cook about 3 meals a day. Or when they work in the yards like they are today, they cook 3 main meals and smoke those. That's morning tea, afternoon tea, and that's the end of this. Just like my boys and sons, I reckon. I treat them like my nephews and my sons. And they treat me the same because they know I don't take any cheek from my sons, but I don't take any cheeks from them, so they don't get cheeky or they're real respectful. Well, sometimes I always tell them, have your don't forget to have a wash and don't forget you have to clean your teeth. But I just muck around like that. And they always say, oh, yeah, Mum, and always sort of looking after them, and when we go into town, like, they look after me then, because sometimes I like to go and have a good time too, and they just make sure I don't make a mess of myself.
Right on, we have shoot number 1, go.
Dance burn, mate, dance burn! On you, Gab. We've been able to organise a bit of spare time, so I decided to let these fellas have a bit of a go at rough riding. They all want to ride in the rodeo at Casfin Show, and most of them haven't had a go before, so they're having a bit of a practice run here today.
All right? Yeah. Push him up, push him up. Hello. Holy go! Good ride, Al.
By July, we're halfway through the muster. Generally, the boys keep working every day for 5 or 6 weeks straight, and then accrue a number of days off.
Wages here are just the same as normal living wages, not real flash. And then all your stores get taken out of that. Of an afternoon you come home, you're allowed 3 beers,
Here we are, June.
smokes. Occasionally they bring lollies out in the camp or something like that. So there's not a big lot of money in it involved where you might save a little bit to push out in camp for so long without going to town. You soon spend it all when you get into town.
You'd have to be absolutely nuts to be doing it for the money. You're probably better off looking elsewhere if you're looking for money. It's purely the lifestyle that has to attract.
Saturday night, pile of the ute. We're the boys from the bush and we're back in town. Well, the dog's in the back, the foot goes down. We're live members of the Outback Club. We're the boys from the bush come in from the scrub.
I would have been out in camp for how long before? Probably a bit over a month and a half. And then that's the first time off we had, so we'd never even had a day off. They were that busy. And then we went to town. We all sort of piled in the back of my ute, which was over the other side of the creek there. A big mob of us in there, and we all went to Timber Creek for the first night, which is normally the big night out.
We're the boys from the bush and we're back in town. We get high when the sun goes down. We're live members of the Outback Club. We're the boys from the bush coming in from the scrub. We're the boys from the bush coming in from the scrub.
Mark didn't have any spurs, doesn't score. There was an early instruction from one of the judges. Must have spurs, must have your number on. Number 77 looks like to be next. In shoot number 1, David Fontaine. Right, mate, let him go. David Fontaine, he was there for a long time. In the shoot, I mean. Thanks, David.
To be perfectly honest, I can't remember a damn thing about the actual ride itself. It's funny, you tend to blank out. Maybe it's adrenaline or fear. Probably just adrenaline, because it's one hell of a rush that you get when you're sitting up there and the world's going around in 4 different ways. You still feel good. You've competed, you've had a go, and it's just a bit of fun.
Here's Brett Orr. Here's Brett Orr in shoot number 1. Currently working on Bradshaw Station.
I'd never rode with some saddle bronc before the rodeo. I'd rode just practice horse in Tambo before. I really didn't know what I was doing. I'm a bit nervy, I suppose.
The judge will let you know to get on it. Now put your backside into it first. Keep your feet out of it, see? He's got a spur on. That's right. Sit down and relax. Talk to him.
Come on, mate.
Make it nice and easy. Come on, old fella.
Let's do this. Good old rider from a few years back, Buddy Tyson, was there, and he came over and gave me a bit of a hand, explained to me where to put the saddle, how to put the saddle on properly, and how to girth it up properly.
Now look, grab the front of your saddle with this hand through to clear the gate. Then you can throw it in, right?
Lift and grab. Right.
Shoot number 1.
Then they let me out of the chute and took a bit for the old horse to come out, which was a bit nervy there for a minute, not knowing what he was going to do. Once he came out, she was just on for about the first 3 or 4 bucks. I was sort of like real nervy, I suppose. I was just clamped up mainly. I went real free on my horse, and after about the 3rd buck, I felt comfortable myself then, and I started spurring and started enjoying it. Then I really enjoyed it after that. Just near the end, once I've got through flowing with the horse, I could hear the crowd yelling out, encouragement coming from a few mates and people I'd never met before, just yelling out, good on you. Made you really feel good.
Catherine Show is a time for us to come to town and see our friends. Generally, the men go their way and we go ours. We all do different things, have different interests.
Here's young Samuel McMahon.
Samuel, how you going? No one at the moment, yeah, but later. How did you go this morning?
Oh, all right.
At the show, I help out on the ICPA store, which is the Isolated Children's Parents Association. It's a lobby group to get better education for our children living in the bush. Fiona spends most of her time with her friends. She also enters various competitions in the vegetable, art and craft sections.
For my garden and agriculture, I won the zucchinis and I came third in the eggs and first and a special mention for arrangement of a bush Christmas in a shoebox lid, and first for a craft that I'd made out of wool and hessian.
You know what to do when the whistle blows? You dismount, run in, and sit on a chair. Bring your horse with you. Go! Go, Fiona! Yes, I think so. He's no gentleman, this fellow, so we'll have to go again. On an inside.
Basically, Sam and Fiona are very close. Because they're close in ages, they're very competitive, and because there's no other children around, that is the only competition they have between each other.
No, come on. Find out how thick this blood is, whether it's thicker than water, eh? Get into it, Fiona. And you can pump from about 200 feet. You'll water a couple of thousand head of cattle with these, no worry at all. I reckon you ought to think about this sort of thing, mate. A few more of these, and while you're at it, if you're thinking of pumping water or pushing it out for miles for cattle, why don't you come over and have a look at these new solar ones?
One thing about my old mate Maloney, he can certainly talk. At times you feel you ought to buy whatever he's trying to sell you just to shut him up.
That box there converts it from, or inverts it from 48 volt DC to 415 volts. And you can put the whole motor and pump down the bore.
How many panels do you need?
Oh, well, I put on one down in South Queensland the other day, 27 panels, but there's others. Yeah, I know, it's a bit dear, that makes him chopper, you know, but that could be most suitable for the job out there, and you never go near it. What do you think about that? Do you want us to have a look at it one day?
Very good, very
good.
good.
You get a cart and I'll call.
My Ruby baby, she likes to rock and roll. You got my number, you know she never called.
It's probably really hard for city people to imagine how important these few social events are each year. It's just so nice for the kids to play with their own friends and for us to get together with ours.
You know she never calls, no, no.
There's quite a bit of history about Bradshaw and this part of the Victoria River. The river itself was first surveyed in 1839. Then in 1856, the Queensland government commissioned a chap by the name of Augustus Gregory to explore inland from the Victoria, actually looking for an inland sea. In 1896, a chap by the name of Captain Joe Bradshaw took up this country and it became known as Bradshaw's Run. The first stock he had here was sheep and goats, which is a bit hard to believe. The first lot of sheep came from a place he had over in Western Australia, and then he bought some more from a neighbouring station here, which took him a good while to walk onto Bradshaw. It appears that between the Aboriginals at the time and the dingoes and the harshness of the environment, the sheep didn't last too long, and he decided to make a cattle station out of it. There's been a lot of interest in the history of the Victoria River District in recent times, both black and white history. Darryl Lewis is a prehistorian who's been coming here to do research for a number of years now.
I first came onto Bradshaw when I was doing research for my master's degree, and I was doing research then on the Aboriginal rock art of the Victoria River District. It's now generally accepted that Aboriginal people have been living here for at least 40,000 years, possibly 50 to 60, and there's no reason to presume that they weren't living here in this district for the same length of time. There definitely were massacres. There's ample evidence to the south of Bradshaw and enough documentation to suggest that much the same thing happened on Bradshaw, particularly on the south where the best cattle lands are. It appears that the first 15 to 20 years there was more or less open warfare and an extremely hostile situation.
In Bradshaw's time, I think when somebody tried to settle permanently, it must have upset the original inhabitants a bit more, and I think there were a number of skirmishes of different magnitude. Captain Joe Bradshaw, who owned the place, his brother was one of those murdered and was buried on a hill just down here past the station.
By about 1910 to 20, the balance seemed to change. There were still hostilities, but a lot less. You can sense in their writings that they were more confident in their control of the country. By 1930, they had total control. There was only very sporadic outbreaks. We have information from various sources which suggests that there was up to 95% loss of population within 50 years. And by about 1930, there were virtually no Aborigines living full-time in the bush.
I came up here in the early 50s, Christmas 52. I worked as the ringer and stockman for a number of years down at Alice Springs and up onto the Barclay Tablelands, and then I started droving. In those days too, there weren't nearly as many white people up here. All the camps were made up of mainly Aboriginal stockmen. They were first-class stockmen, and it was a lot of fun working in those camps for a young fellow to come up in those days. It was more a bit of the wild and woolly west, last frontier type of thing, and it was as much an adventure. While you were still young, you didn't worry about money, it was just an adventure. And I suppose in latter years, I stayed here too long. It got into my blood, and I just never wanted to leave the country. I just sort of got married to the country, married to my stations.
It was pretty hard to work for in those days, in his younger days, and I was probably a bit lucky, I suppose, that I've been brought up that way. I can sort of relate to that importance of, doing the job properly. So although he was hard, and I think, a lot of men will agree with me that he was a hard bugger to work for, but I think, it's been an advantage to have been brought up that way. Two different mustering operations on Bradshaw. There's the controlled horse musters inside the paddock areas, and there's the feral or bush cattle musters or scrubber musters outside the paddocks in the remote or isolated areas that haven't been as yet fenced. We don't use horses generally against these animals because of the sharp horns and the aggressiveness of the animal. Can quite easily puncture a horse and also do the same to the man that's riding them. The different noises, the different smells of helicopters and trucks and men are all totally alien to them. The type of mustering we do up there is portable yards and Hessian wings. You run your Hessian wings out off your yard, pointing into the area that you're actually mustering, and through the use of helicopters, direct all the cattle in that area into the yard. By helicopter or pushed up into a yard are usually caught with these catches. Catcher driver is able to knock it up for a while, take it in a sort of a few small circles or give it a small run for a while. And once it becomes puffed to a certain point, then he just knocks the beast over or bumps it over, straps his legs up and picked up again later on a truck.
You grab another rope. Leg rope.
Not many properties do bull catching anymore. Bradshaw's one of the few left. It's fast, hard work all day, sort of like you're flathead all day. You've got to be aware all day because you like one little slip and you stuff the whole muster up. All the bulls we're catching have never seen people before, so all the bulls always get caught. As soon as they're caught, they're sent straight to the meat work. You've got to catch them as if you could. Something's got to be caught. It's got to be caught real quick, tied up quick, so you can be back with the main mob again.
Usually the Coolangatta muster is the last major operation for the year. By the time we're getting to the end of September, most of the ringers are getting ready to return back down south. Doug runs the feral muster up the Coolangatta Valley on his own. I stay here to draft, feed and look after the day-to-day running of the station. The most important job is checking every stock water on the station at least every third day. Because if there is a breakdown of some description, you can easily perish a lot of cattle. We had a very light wet last year in a lot of areas. You get dams and tanks that aren't filled, also billabongs, natural waters. So this certainly creates a problem. Hopefully we'll get some storms in the next few weeks, and yeah, I don't anticipate any major problems. Mobile 2 Bradshaw, do you read, Sam? Is that you, Sam? Yeah, I can hardly hear you because it's pretty noisy here. Well, hang on. Yeah, are you going to be finished school to go out to Rosewood after dinner? Oh, yeah.
Much more fun if I was at the stock camp.
Oh, it might
I
be
hate
too.
this part.
But you don't learn much school out there.
Yes, I do. I got my cattle to swim or something.
Listen, this afternoon we're going to do some revision. So here we are, come up and... Sam and Fiona now, what are they, 11 and 12, and they're just craving for other children's company, their own age. And Sam, well, he's going away to boarding school next year, and that's all he can think about, of just playing sport and rugby and doing different things. I mean, he's had all his life on the station, and now he's looking for something else, the next stage.
Sometimes I feel scared about boarding school. When I just sit and think about it and how I'll be away from all my animals and mum and dad. But it's a new world and it'll just be fun once I settle in on it. I think kids who go to school in the city are disadvantaged to kids that go to school in the country, because we learn how to drive before we're 18 if you want to. And you learn lots of other things other than maths and stuff. And it's just different to watching television all day like kids at city do.
I'm going to miss him terrifically as a little mate. Also, I suppose, just straight out as an employee. There's somebody where we have to almost be employed to do his work. Possibly Fiona can take on a lot of it, but he's been a terrific help to me over the last few years. Fiona's not physically strong enough to do a lot of the work that Sam does, and by the same token, she wants to do the little girl things other than just all the boy things that Sam does. I'm going to find it, yes, a lot harder for myself. I'm going to have to do more myself because he helps me out a lot. But this is a fact of life that's been with virtually all my kids.
Probably after school, I think I'll go away and do a course, and then an agricultural course, and then probably get a chopper licence. And then, don't know, from there, just try and own a property when I get older and some experience.
But what about Bradshaw? You don't think you'll live on Bradshaw for the rest of your life?
Oh, well, I think by the time I get old enough to own Bradshaw or look after Bradshaw, it'll be all cut up into little places like down in New South Wales, and that'll be really small and little tiny places where you can only run a few hundred head or whatever.
I think the love of the lifestyle and the love for the country too, you know, you've got to have your heart in it to be able to keep going under, you know, pretty harsh conditions and not much reward sometimes. So I think your heart has to be, you know, right in it. And I think it might be the case for Dad, I think, you know.
The future for us here is pretty problematical, I suppose. I've got boys that would like to carry on here, but it comes back to whether they're going to have to bust their guts for the rest of their life, like I virtually have, or whether they want to take it a bit easier. When the wet turns up, it's just a terrific relief to everybody. You get your first storms, you get your first little bit of green feed, and the cattle start to pick up, and you get your monsoon rains, and it cools down. Well, virtually everything in the garden's lovely. The job's right. Once the rains start to come, you know, the Christmas isn't far away and another year is finished.
Would everyone like to join in for the chorus of Jingle Bells? Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride.
Getting ready for Christmas Day.
Hey, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in one horse open sleigh.
Sam McBean is very well known to us. We're just so lucky that Fiona's decided to stay with us, Sam, so we'll be able to keep an eye on what you're up to as well while you're off at boarding school. Which boarding school are you going to?
Church of England Grammar something. Churchy in Brisbane.
Extend to all of you a very sincere welcome to this service, marking as it does the beginning of a new phase in your family life and in the life particularly of the boys who are coming in to boarding, year 8.
I guess as a mother, I hope he chooses the right road. I don't mind what he does. But I think for Ian's sake, yes, I'd like to see him end up on the land. But I just want him to be happy. I really feel he'll come back. He'll come back to the station.
Sam's going down there?
Probably like it down there better than opening gates.
Yeah, well, what do you reckon? You have to do 21 or something. One trip round, he might reckon it's better than boarding school than doing opening blooming gates all the time, eh?
Yeah, he said he hated the food though, so...
They hated the food down there.
Yeah.
No rib bones might be, eh?
Yeah.